All right. Thank you everyone for joining our Dion Leadership webinar series today. Our topic today is Unlocking Leadership Potential, a candid conversation with top executive coaches. Joining us today is Steve Dion, founder and CEO of Dion Leadership. And also from Dion Leadership, we have Mary Ann Rivers, Kelly Shear, and soon to be joining us, hopefully, Jim Tagman.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. I appreciate you spending some time from your busy day with us to talk about leadership coaching. And in a few minutes, I'll be introducing our esteemed panel, but just wanted to start with a couple of prepared comments and say that we're excited to have this panel again. This is our 5th year of doing a leadership coaching panel in the middle of the year. And we get a lot of great feedback about this series. And the purpose of this is to really help talent development folks really understand a little bit more about what happens in a coaching program or such. It's easy for me as a leader of this organization to talk about the coaching experience, but you're going to be hearing for almost an hour from 3 folks that are spending much of their day with executives working through the challenges that they have to be more effective in their organization. So our hope for you today, by spending an hour with us, is that you will better understand what executives are struggling with today. You'll know exactly what happens in a coaching session and how do we help change mindset and skill set. And then to help you maybe think a little bit more about what might be a good use of coaching in your organization. When is individual one-on-one coaching the right solution? When might you send somebody to a training program? And when maybe the issue is something that's more internal and you don't want to spend your money on those resources. But before we get going and before we get a chance for our panelists to introduce themselves, I just wanted to quickly kind of orient you to our approach to coaching. When people talk about coaching, there's lots of coaching approaches. There's life coaching, there's career coaching, there's mentoring. So let me just explain who Dion Leadership is for those of you that are new and what coaching is about, and then I'll turn it over to our panelists. So for us at Dion Leadership, our why is really about helping organizations start every day excited and end every day accomplished. And we pride ourselves in doing a lot of thought leadership in this space and helping think through leadership and culture application. So using coaching and other tools to help inform and change culture. And we've really built this business around a set of powerful leadership solutions and individual leadership coaches. And the work that we do really unpacks into 4 different buckets. So today we'll be talking about this leadership coaching bucket, and the types of coaching that we typically do is find ourselves coaching C-suite executives through maybe director, like VP and director level coaching. Sometimes it's high potential leaders, newly hired leaders into roles. We also do a lot of work in leadership development and programs, in team development and OD. We're not going to be talking about those today. I will say, though, because I sometimes forget at the end, our next webinar, which is going to be on November 12th, and we'll put that in the chat, is going to be talking about business simulation. So that's more into the leadership and management development program space. So kind of toggling to something different. If that is of interest to you to understand, like, what is a business simulation? How is it different than a training class? Feel free to join that. We'll put that in the chat as well. So related to the leadership coaching space, these are some of the partners that we work with. So today we'll be unpacking conversations about coaching. We will, of course, not talk about a particular exact person. We may use a title or we may use a company, but we won't use a company and a title together. So you know that we keep coaching conversations very confidential. And then again, as we think about coaching, just briefly, kind of 2 more slides here, and then I really want our panelists to share their wisdom with you. When we think about coaching, we realize that coaching is different than training because we're working at the mindset level with somebody. We're enabling behavior change through using a cognitive behavioral learning model. We really believe in using the ICF coaching standards and ethics and a strong coaching program and process, but we're helping people create new mindsets and new habits so they can approach situations differently through a formal process and methodology. So at Dion Leadership here, we have very specific processes that coaches follow. So if we're doing executive coaching, our coaches will follow through a common process. But what you'll see as I turn this over to our panelists is you're bringing a unique experience and expertise from different coaches. So we have 3 coaches here today that come from different industries, different backgrounds, different approaches, but we can use a common approach and methodology, and because we know that that gets proven results as well. And then the last thing I'll say before I ask our 3 panelists to introduce themselves is each year we also do a coaching study where we go back and analyze, and we ask our previous coachees from the last 2 years to answer some questions about their coaching and the performance that's occurred since then. We analyze those results, and we write them up in a white paper. And last time I did this coaching study, we unpacked some of that data, and I didn't want to take 10 or 15 minutes on that. So we're going to put the link in the chat. We'll also send it out in the recording after this. I invite you to look at that data. You'll see direct comments from coachees. You'll see information about the types of activities kind of categorically that people were working on, and understanding a little bit more about what coaching did and didn't do, and when you have a large coaching assignment or a small, what the results were. Pretty deep study. But really what I wanted to do today is I'll be moderating this panel and turn it over to Marianne Rivers, Kelly Shear, and Jim Tagman, and they're going to be talking a little bit about each of their coaching experiences. We do have a set of 10 prepared questions. I'm happy to moderate those. However, we'd love you to use the chat to ask your questions, and your questions will get first priority so we can guide this conversation around what you each have in mind as well. So with that, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, starting with Kelly, to get to know us. We'd like to get to know you a little bit. So just take 2 minutes and talk to us a little bit about kind of how you got into leadership coaching and your perspective on coaching, and we'll kind of open it up with getting the 3 of your voices in the room.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. I'm honored to be here with Marianne and Jim, colleagues of mine, and it's just a fantastic experience. So nice to share the screen with you. And so thanks for that. I became a coach not necessarily by accident, but because when I got to a certain point in my career, I realized that I didn't have the kind of coaching that I saw other executives have and flourish. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, how come I didn't have that? I want that. And of course, I was to a point at that point where I thought, well, maybe I should be that. And so that was really my push to sort of take a look and see exactly what this whole thing is. I had fantastic mentors, but as those of us in business know, mentors are a very important part of success, but they're not necessarily coaches. And so I was missing the accountability partnership, frankly. And so thought that perhaps I might be able to offer that to folks in different spaces. My experience is primarily healthcare and nonprofit organizations, everything from large academic healthcare institutions to small senior living mom and pop shops. I've stood up companies, large and small, built them, bought them, sold them, dismantled them, and restarted them, and loved every second of it. And so through all of that, I'd like to think that my approach is probably leaning a little bit more consultative at times. My philosophy is that when we know better, we do better. And so if I've learned a lesson, mostly the hard way, I find sometimes when people ask, it's appropriate to share the ditches that I have found myself in, because I feel like if we don't call out from the ditches to say, hey, there's an obstacle here, then we're not doing a total service sometimes to our clients. And so I lean a little that way, but my philosophy is truly that it is an absolute gift. And here's one dirty little secret about coaching. The reality is, for me, I learn more from coaching every single day than I think my coachees do from me. Maybe that's not saying much about my style, but it's the truth. And I will tell you that I learn and I love to share stories. And so I'm just thrilled to be here today. Thanks.
Kelly? Marianne?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Kelly, for warming up the stage. Like you, I love being in this environment with all of you because I learn a ton from every interaction, especially really good coaches like the two of you. That's what makes my job so wonderful every day, and also learning from other clients. I have a background in sales and marketing functionally. I was with a large printing and publishing company for 20 years and was in various aspects of leadership and then eventually on the executive committee at that company. Then I was recruited to be the CEO of entertainment publications. If any of you ever had to sell an entertainment book, I am so sorry for that experience as a child. I went from having salespeople who were consultant professionals to 4 million 8-year-olds, I said at one point in sales. So that was a whole new experience for me. Like Kelly, I recognized when I got into that CEO role that I really could benefit from a coach. I didn't have a coach in my previous role. And when I got dumped into that executive committee, it was a whole new world. And I learned a lot of really tough lessons that the help of a coach would have made all the difference in the world, I believe. So I was a CEO for 5 years. I worked for a strategic firm that owned it first, and then I sold the company to a private equity firm. And I had that experience of working for private equity. Wonderful, fascinating, wouldn't trade it for $1 million, but I always found myself fighting for leadership development, and it was a turnaround situation, which there's a lot happening. This was in 2008 in Detroit, so it was like real stuff. And got into basically a knockdown, drag out fight with the private equity firm about investing in the leadership team to be able to get through this tough situation, and ended up mutually parting. And recognized when I took some time to reflect afterwards that development of people and getting people prepared and ready to run companies and get results and deal with the hard challenges every day was what really lit me up, and I had some good experience to do that. So I've been executive coaching, and I do succession planning work for smaller businesses, strategy also. So taking the elements of all those things and putting them together to help people be more successful. So that's my background, and I will pass it over to Jim, I would imagine, or back to Steve.
I'm here, Marianne. And yeah, thank you. And good to see you, Marianne and Kelly and Steve. My name is Jim Tageman. I'm a PCC certified coach. I spent my career on various human resources roles, in leadership and for automotive and service industry and retail. And but I found my passion was always supporting my leadership team and their team development. Sure, I loved implementing various HCM systems and tools in the human resources world, but where my passion really was when I saw my leadership team having some challenges and facilitating them working through that, as well as the one-on-one conversations I would have with those leadership team members. It was usually an issue with our boss, challenge with their team, whatever it may be. Realized my passion was coaching, and I realized this is really what I wanted to do now that I'm grown up for the rest of my life. So after 25 years in HR, moved out of the corporate world, and I've been doing this. I've been doing coaching and leadership training development since the end of 2019. Albeit not the greatest timing, the end of 2019. I think a lot of stuff happened in early 2020. Still the best decision I made in my life, my career. My approach to coaching is really to engage that client on all levels, focusing not only on what they say, but how they say it and their body language. In the coaching world, that's called ontological coaching, but it's really about coaching the whole person and helping them break down any barriers they may have to their own success. A lot of my clients are successful already, but it's like, what is it going to take for them to get to the next level? That's what I really enjoy focusing on in my coaching. And I'm so happy to be here with you all today and to answer some of these great questions.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks to all three of you. I can't wait to dig deep into a few of the questions that we have here today. So just as I moderate this, I'll throw in a few things as we go through this. One, I just wanted to comment on is, we have about 60 different coaches, but one of the common themes you see from the three of these folks, even though they come from different functional areas, different types of companies, is our view or our belief is that leadership coaches should come from business walks of life and have a lot of experience. You know, you don't come out of graduate school with a degree in human development at 23 and start coaching a VP on how to run the, you know, IT department. You need some war wounds, some life experiences. But then the other commonality is all three of these folks said, I made the connection that leadership is how we got business performance done. And so therefore, I want to dig deeper into that, and I'm getting inquisitive, and I learn more, and I get certified as a coach. And so as we look at our coaching bench, and as those of you that think about, you know, should we bring coaching into our organization? And if so, who would be a good coach? Is think through the background and experience of those coaches. So let's start with the beginning of the coaching process. So at Dion Leadership here, our coaching process starts with the coach selection. And typically, we ask a coachee to look at 2 or 3 bios and interview 2 or 3 separate people. So I thought we could start with walking through that chemistry call process. You know, what happens when you have a new coachee, and for those of you that are listening, and maybe you're a talent development leader that says to a leader, hey, we want you to have a coach, here's the process. What's going on in the mindset of that person when they're first engaging in coaching, maybe for the first time ever? Why is this step so important? And sort of what's the dynamics that happen to get them really leaning into, I'm going to be spending, you know, 6 months with this person? Marianne, could you kick us off? Talk a little bit about this.
Sure. I believe, as I've done this for a period of time, that the decision probably gets made fairly quickly into that chemistry call. There is an interaction that takes place almost intuitively, although there is a process and people will walk through questions. But you have to feel, as the coachee, a real ability to be vulnerable and open up and feel completely comfortable with that person. And I believe it happens. I wish I could say this with research, and someday maybe I'll do it, but how quickly does that decision get made? Everyone's looking for a different person for a coach, and I have had situations where I'll ask every time when someone does make the selection and I find out that they've selected me, why did you choose me? And I tell them, I asked you that because it's important for me to understand what it was about our conversation that was most valuable for you in the approach, so that I can continue to lean into that more. And so I do, I ask a lot of questions. I basically will do a mini coaching session when I have an interaction and a chemistry call to give that person an understanding. So I'll ask questions about what's working for them, what's not working for them, understand their situation, and go deeper into some of the tougher questions. I am very upfront about what the expectations are for the coaching engagement, their role, the role I'm there to play. And I try to go probably a little bit deeper in that chemistry call, maybe than others, to let them know that this is not going to be a superficial surface ride. And if they want it to be more tactical and more, I guess maybe more tactical and less digging into some of their challenges related to their fears, what's getting in their way, their beliefs that are stopping things. So it's sometimes an hour plus when we get going into a chemistry call, but it gives them the opportunity to really understand style, questions that might be asked, expectations, and what it feels like to be in this space. And hopefully there's a sense of safety and comfort, because that's the number one important element in coaching: confidentiality, safety, and knowing that they can talk about anything.
Thanks, Marianne. And the other question we get regularly when we're doing the coach matching on our end, where we get an intake in and we learn about the situation and the coach and coachee and putting bios in front of them, because we don't want them to look at 60 different people. You know, we want to curate a couple. Is this notion of like, should I have somebody similar to me or somebody very different than me? And I know we find that a lot of times the coachee may gravitate towards, I want somebody who's like me in my industry. Sometimes somebody will say, I am looking for, you know, the opposite gender because of the situations I want to lean into, but Jim or Kelly, any thoughts on kind of the pros and cons of somebody working with somebody like them versus different than them?
Go ahead, Jim.
I think one key piece is ensuring, and Dan does a good job of this, is ensuring that this is not consulting. This is coaching. So sometimes people will like to grab someone that is, hey, he's in my industry for myself. He's an ex-HR executive. He's going to give me insights. Yes, absolutely. I might put on that hat and provide some insights, but that should not be the primary reason for making the call on a coaching client or on a coach. The biggest thing is going to be that fit, and some people might just want somebody totally different from them. And I think that's where I think I've had a lot of success, is those people that, hey, I need to stretch my boundaries. And so I think that's a key piece, is that you don't want most people shouldn't want just necessarily that like thing. Some of it might be aspirational, sure, but remembering that we are in a coaching engagement, not necessarily a consulting engagement, that should be secondary. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I get two pieces of feedback. Marianne, I'm glad you asked too, because so do I. What was it? What is it? So that I can A, do more of it because that worked, and B, perhaps, take that bent. It's important. So I hear two things typically. One is an energy level you can keep up, right? I get that a lot. You can keep up with me, or you run fast, et cetera. And I tend to run fast. So that works in the similar category. But I will find that coaches who are courageous and say, I need somebody on the other side of things who can call me on my business. If you can say, you know what, no, time out. That's not going to work here. And if you're courageous enough to do that in a coaching space, I find those are the coaches that really leapfrog. They are vulnerable, to your point, right? They're open, and that you have an immediate trust. If you can choose someone who immediately, and frankly give permission to, an open invitation, please do this for me, stretch me, grow me. That I find is the most, I think that's the most powerful partnership in a coach and a coachee.
And tell me about how much knowing their business or their function matters or trips you up in a coaching engagement.
Yeah, I think for me, it's two-sided, right? I mean, I do a lot of work inside healthcare. I spent a lot of time inside healthcare. And so I am not, however, a clinician. So I don't bring that. I'm not a practicing clinician. So for me, I know the ABCs, and there's a lot of alphabet soup in healthcare. There's a lot of alphabet soup in lots of industries. And so that sometimes helps. And so there's that piece of it. I will say the other end of things, though, I do a lot of work in manufacturing and in services industries, et cetera, where I can ask the objective question. And sometimes that's more valuable than me nodding and understanding how different things work. So I would argue that that's kind of a yes and, right? Yes to both. The objectivity is important, but sometimes understanding a dynamic can allow a coach to get into a conversation that may not have occurred otherwise. So it's kind of a both and.
Yeah, and with me, I'd say it's not necessarily the widgets being sold or created or manufactured, whatever it may be. It's going to be the leadership experiences that then maybe the client would like to tap into. Having international experience, understanding that, hey, I'm dealing with multiple cultures and having to juggle that. And or I'm part of a region and I have to deal with headquarters. I'm part of headquarters and I have to deal with a region. That's what I hear more of in terms of getting that alignment. It really hasn't, the industry is almost agnostic. It's the leadership experience and the level of leadership that they want, that might build a comfort level that they can say, okay, he's been in this type of stuff. So maybe he might have some thoughts or insights, be able to ask the right questions to get me to be better.
I would concur with both Kelly and Jim. I work in all industries, and I think that it's somewhat irrelevant. If you were consulting on technical issues of quality manufacturing standards, it's a completely different thing. But we're talking about communication, relationship, leadership behavior, and human performance, which crosses all industries. And like Kelly mentioned, I think sometimes not having an expertise or understanding the business too much is helpful to ask those questions at other people, the simple questions that nobody asks, the obvious, when you're sort of the newbie in trying to understand somebody's situation.
So let's move into another area to gain a better understanding of what executives' coaching needs are. So they've selected this coach. Think through kind of your last, year or two, kind of the pattern. Pick a coaching area that you regularly coach to, and can you talk a little bit about that specific area and the dynamic of that? Jim, you want to get started?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that comes up with me is managing and dealing with generational differences. A lot of clients are maybe 40 something, 50 somethings, and they're now dealing with 20 somethings that have just had completely different life experiences. It's an extremely mature group that has been through experiences at that age that none of us can really even tap into. So the challenge there is really having them, they're not going to necessarily crack that code, but really to focus on the concept that these folks that might be working on their teams or their peers, they might not, they seem difficult, but it's really that focus on maybe they're just a little bit different than me. And if I get over the fact that, they're not difficult, they're difficult, but they're just different, then we can think about looking at, hey, they have different goals. They have different outlooks. They have different work styles. I work a lot with coaches on their self-awareness, their situational awareness. A lot of you might know this is emotional intelligence. That really taps into that, getting out of that focus on myself and what has gotten me here today and what made me so successful in my career. And they need to follow that path, getting out of that mindset and turning that focus on the employees, seeing what interests them, what challenges them, what gets them excited. And the more they're engaging and they're not looking at the group holistically as that group of people and looking at, the individuals, and we might work through issues with individuals to kind of help them better understand. We might also throw out concepts like reverse mentoring, where maybe someone coming out of school or 20 something might be mentoring a senior executive. And I've had a senior executive actually go into that type of thing where he meets with a couple of his more junior employees on a weekly basis. It might be the brown bag lunch. It also might be skip level meetings, just so they're really tapping in, so they're not overgeneralizing and they're looking at these folks as individuals. I think that has been a big successful piece in terms of helping them crack this code of the generational differences that we have.
Interesting. Okay. So we got generational differences. Marianne,
Yeah.
What topic would you say you regularly coach a lot to?
The thing that bubbled up in my mind, Steve, was managing up. There's been a lot. Maybe it's just coincidence, but I have many executives who are really struggling with, they're stepping up into that next role, and they're getting more engaged with upper management, maybe across the board, or they have a new boss or a boss who they have a relationship challenge with, and helping people to understand that the leadership pipeline, you've heard that, theory before, as you move through your career, the role changes and the characteristics and behaviors and skills that you need to have changes significantly. And sometimes people get caught off guard. So it's things like, you're going from being a doer to an influencer in every regard. So you need to be learning skills, including skills of interacting with executive leadership in executive presence, and first building that credibility. And what does executive presence look, sound, feel like at that given company? Because it can be very different. How you dress, how you speak, how casual it is, how much people swear or don't swear. I mean, the cultures are very, individual. So you have to learn that. I also think what happens is many times people feel like their boss, and I read a statistic recently, that 65% of workers would take a pay cut if someone would fire their boss. 65%, which is sad. That's from Hogan research. So it's, it's not just some random, but helping people to understand that they don't have to be at the mercy of their boss. And they need to manage that relationship as much as they sometimes do the people that report with them or their peers, and really build a trusting relationship and being courageous enough to understand what that person is going through and asking them questions like, is it possible that they're dealing with some stress and some pressure that maybe you're not aware of? What might that be? And getting them to look at it from another perspective and manage through it, because they just want to throw their arms up and go, I can't do this anymore. I can't work, with this person, and I just don't understand the dynamics of executive leadership. It's different. And it's tough, but you can work through it, and it really is about courage.
Cool. And Kelly, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the leading up conversation and the managerial, generational space too, leads to what I see. I was thinking back about this. I think 90+% of my coachees in my entire coaching career have suffered from imposter syndrome. And that's interesting because I coach all levels of organizations, from owners and CEOs to, mid-level directors to brand new employees in leadership, right? So I find it to be sort of a ubiquitous, and I see my colleagues nodding, I find it to be kind of a ubiquitous scenario that I coach in on the daily. And I think there's several things that play into it. And I think what it really comes down to is a worthiness conversation. And that's kind of deep. And sometimes we can get to the kind of deep part about it, why someone is not feeling worthy of the position, of the attention, of the salary, of the work itself, et cetera, et cetera. And so we get to worthiness. And I think that's an important space. A lot of times when we talk about that and we draw out that worthiness, it's like a frying pan to the face almost, where someone realizes, wow, of course I'm worthy. And so sometimes in that space, just calling that out to say, why are you not feeling worthy of this? And then immediately they'll pop up and say, well, I am worthy. And so they sort of self-correct in that moment and think, wow, that's a mindset shift. And sometimes that's enough. Other times we have conversations about the worst case scenario. So what happens in imposter? So if I pull back the curtain and I find what? And we talk about that. I find what? Someone who has been incredibly successful in his or her career, who has been working on relationships since kindergarten, who has been, dedicated and steadfast to leadership principles, et cetera, et cetera. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a hype man situation. And that's okay, because it's real and it's true. And I will tell you that the loneliest place in the org chart, the top, the top. And that is what plays into imposter syndrome, because there's nobody saying, hey man, that was great, by the way, at that board meeting, you totally crushed that. People don't say that to their CEOs, and they should, but they don't. And so sometimes you just need to know that when you crush it, you're worthy of the job. So I'll say that the worst case scenario is a place that we work that out through the imposter syndrome. We work out worst case scenario. What are we really talking about here? The worst case scenario is someone's going to say, you're a terrible leader, and I don't know why you've been spending 20 years here and worked your way up from all the other C-suites and now you landed here. No. So we work through that. The other piece of this is a brand of leadership. And that is something that I work on with all of my coachees is, what is it that you want to say every time you walk into a room so that you feel like you are on brand? When you're on brand, you're not an imposter. When you're on brand, you are your best version of yourself, and you're not perfect, but it's still something that you're striving for. So I think that's really important. And when I was doing my little, what do I talk about? Imposter syndrome. And I think about this, I think the book by Adam Grant, Think Again, is an awesome book on imposter syndrome, because you get to change your mind. You get to evolve. You get to learn and grow. I love that. The other book I love in this space is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And that is a permission to be, Marianne, you talked about in your culture, if you are brash and that's what your culture is, then do you. And I think the more opportunity we can get people to step into their brand and authenticity, that's a real cure, if you will, for imposter syndrome.
Well, awesome. Thanks, you guys. And I think the things that you're you've each said were corroborated in our coaching study as well, particularly this notion of confidence from an imposter syndrome in terms of the outcomes that coaches report that they receive from coaching. It's a new level of confidence to lean into any of the three, areas you just talked about or more. Let me invite people to ask some questions as well. One quick comment was, what were those book recommendations again, Kelly? So could you kind of
Sure,
pause on
thank
that,
you.
and then I will lean into the next area.
Go right ahead. I'll put it right in the chat if that's okay.
Yeah, put in chat for everybody. Perfect. So let's talk about then, what happens in a coaching session. So you work with your coachee, and we always work on a development plan first, bringing in their boss into this process. We're not just coaching to say, hey, let's just unpack your day and vent and move on. This is about making long-term behavior change. So we have a developmental area. We know that underpinning beneath that, there's some behavioral and mindset tendencies. Jim, can you talk a little bit about the arc of a coaching hour? Like, what do you do in a coaching hour that helps somebody kind of rethink so they can bring different habits into the workplace?
Absolutely. And I kind of like uncover the mystery behind what happens during a coaching session. Thank you. As Steve noted, this is assuming, and we're going to go through the process of setting up an action plan. What are the key strategic behavioral challenges that the client has? And that's going to be through a lot of work from stakeholder feedback to maybe a couple of one or two assessments that may occur, so they can get a 360 understanding of what's going on with them. So now we're moving on to, we've got that roadmap, so to speak, of what they want to focus on. Let's talk about the coaching session itself. And it's pretty basic, but I'll put a caveat or an asterisk next to that. So step one is going to be, we're going to follow up on the previous session's action items. That's where we start. Every session is going to be a little bit about accountability and ownership by the coachee. We don't own the coaching process. The coachee owns the coaching process. We help facilitate. So we're going to focus on, that's the first step. Second step is going to be surfacing that work issue that might have occurred or might be coming up, that might be tied to the action plan. It could be a communications issue. It could be a delegation issue. It could be a managing up issue, whatever that may be. We're going to surface that issue. Then we're going to take a look at that issue. Is that really the issue here? Or is that maybe a symptom of a bigger issue? And we're going to talk through that. And a lot of this is going to be through questioning. The coachee is talking about 80 to 90% of the time. We're asking questions to help them kind of come up with, okay, what's going on? It might be inside them. Most of the stuff is. They just need to get it out. So that's going to be the next step, is really breaking down that issue, whether it's a true issue or a symptom of a bigger issue. Then we're going to be working on, we understand the issue. Let's come up with some options around maybe how we can resolve it. And then it's going to be, the next step is developing an action plan around that issue. What steps are you going to take? Most likely, hopefully between now and the next time we talk, so we can kind of break that down. What happened? What didn't happen? What's your action plan going to be to kind of work through that issue? And then we're going to close that session about, getting clarity, understanding. We usually set up all of our engagements through be it a 6-month, 3-month, 1-year engagement. We have that all calendared out already. Okay, let me go to that caveat now. As I said, the client owns the session. We're going to usually follow the arc. And I think Kelly and Marianne will say that, 90%, 89% of the time we do. But if something comes up that they want help with, we have that flexibility, because the goal of an effective coach is we need to meet the client where they are. What's going on with you? If you're going to, okay, Jim, I got this action plan, but that's something I really don't have the energy for because this just happened. We might talk through something like that. Let me clarify. We're not therapists. We're not consultants. We're not a member of clergy. We might tap into those things, but the key focus is what's going on today that's going to make you, hopefully we can work on to make you better tomorrow. So we're going to meet the client where they are. And sometimes that might be a situation where we might have to do some role playing. I've got this major thing coming up. I'm talking to the board. I've got to meet with my team, and I need another set of eyes. We always offer that flexibility during our coaching engagements to move off the quote unquote arc or the process to make sure that we're giving the client what they need. Because 9 times out of 10, or even greater than that, it's going to tie back to that challenge they're having, or the action plan, the coaching action plan, the strategy around communication, managing up, managing down, all those things. It all ties back to that. And that's going to be our roadmap as we move through this arc and this session to all of our future sessions. That's it.
Great, Jim. Awesome. We have so many other areas I want to cover. I'm going to resist the urge to get deeper. I think that was a great overarching approach for people to understand a little bit more about the coaching. I think this next question that came in does follow into this. Do you typically use assessments in coaching, and what assessments do you typically use? I know we're going to talk about 360s as well. So why don't we turn over to that question while we're here in this process? Kelly, I think you were going to
Sure. Yeah.
cover that.
So for me, data is so powerful because, especially, we just talked about imposter syndrome, right? We just talked about sort of what perception and reality can be, right? And how perception, frankly, can do a number on us. And so if I feel a certain way about my leadership and I'm not my best self, then I can sort of get into that spiral, right? Of self-doubt, on the shoulder, the whole thing, the naysayer and all that. So from my perspective, I use a 360 assessment. We use all kinds of assessments inside a Dion Leadership coaching engagement. It depends on what that coachee needs, but oftentimes will be something like a 360. We also do stakeholder interviews. So we're getting an objective point of view about the leadership and opportunity of that coachee. When that data come back, we're able to say, hang on a minute, we talked a little bit about your skill sets in these 5 areas. You said that these are areas that you are woefully lacking, or you have no experience, or whatever that is. And yet here come your data to say your leadership, your direct reports, and your peers are all saying, you know what, Kelly, actually, these are areas that you are 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10 superstar in. I trust Kelly in this space. This is the space where she excels. And so in the face of that data, our job as coaches, at least in my opinion, is to say, I need you to understand that this perception is your reality. And so they need sometimes to sit with that and then test that assumption. Go back in and actually, when you do that set of skills or you have that interaction, what oftentimes happens in a coaching engagement is they'll come back and they'll say, you know what, I'm actually pretty good at that. That might actually be my sweet spot. And so data helps us enormously. And so yes, we use assessments. They're an important part of a coaching engagement from my perspective. They're an important part of sort of the self-realization of a coaching arc, if you will, or a coaching engagement, where really a true assessment of how it is you're doing and showing up is an important piece of leadership. And so yes, we do. I would say that, knowledge is power and data defies your inner critic. And so anytime we can use data, we absolutely try to do that. Let's get some objectivity around this, because we can be in our own head a little much, and that sometimes just deters the coaching. The other thing I'll say too is oftentimes, excuse me, Jim mentioned the coaching plan. It's important for us as coaches to tie the data back to the plan, so that when the coachee says, well, I'm actually not, and you say, hang on, time out, right? Let's go back to what's real and what's true and what the people who are interacting with you every day are saying about that. And so we pull the data back into that plan to be a constant reminder of what shows up on the daily in their leader brand.
And not only can we tie it to that coaching action plan that we create, but we can also tie it to the company's competencies or values or leadership standards or expectations. Because if somebody internal is saying, we need you to do that thing on the wall over there, we can connect that data to that, organizational commitment.
Very, very important point. And remember, the assessment piece isn't fantastic, not so great. It's not binary. It's mostly alignment, which is really great, Steve, to your point, which is to say, how does Kelly emulate these core values? Is she in alignment with her leadership, her company, her core value, her own priorities? And then that gap is where we manage. So it's not this binary, you're fantastic, you're not fantastic. It's more of, there are opportunities here to get better aligned with leadership, better aligned with priorities of the company. So that's a great point.
I
Yeah,
would
there's
just
another-
add to,
Yeah, go ahead,
sorry,
Mary.
Steve, the one thing that's really important is it's contextual. So it's not good or bad. It's always going back to your role, because some assessments or some things that will come out in data will show you that there are some areas that in this role, you'll have to build some skill or some strength around, or some blind spots that you aren't aware of because it's changed, and making sure the context ties. That's the only other, you guys did a great job unpacking data though. Wow.
And let me just say one more thing about it. Sometimes it gives the coachee permission to let things go. It's really important, right? To say, you know what, this is, I understand that you're fantastic. You spend a lot of time in this space, but recognize that that is not a tippy top priority in this space. So you're good. And let's now work on these things that are more of a priority for the company, the leadership, et cetera. That is sort of a permission to say, not less here, more here, right? Which I think is really instructive.
Yeah, we've been doing this now for almost 18 years and have used a ton of different 360 tools and assessments, and many do the job, but some are a little clunkier than others. Some are more expensive than others. Some take a respondent 20 minutes to complete. Some take 45 minutes to complete. So, you know, what we've found and what we've settled in on is a 360 tool that has 9 different competency models within it, but it's within one suite of products or tools. So you could do a mid-manager set of questions, a business unit leader, an individual contributor, a sales contributor. So the person's getting feedback in concert with their role, but it's not that heavy of a lift. There was another question here that says, you know, 360s are a big investment. Are there other quicker assessments that you can do? So really 2 other things that we're doing. One is we're also always doing a couple of stakeholder interviews. So we're talking, depending on which size coaching program, from 1 to 3 or 6 people around them. And so that is a bit of a qualitative verbal 360 assessment. And it, to Marianne's point, it contextualizes the data of what's really going on in the organization. So we do that. In addition, we also always offer one self-assessment. So for some situations or organizations where maybe the dynamic is such that even if they picked a coaching program that normally bakes a 360, and we just say, there's a lot of noise here. We don't think people are going to be honest on it. Maybe they're not safe on it. We can always do a self-assessment. We'll do a DISC work of leaders, we'll do a DISC management, we'll do a Hogan, an EQ assessment. So then it's only the self person completing it. Within our coaching programs, those assessments are baked in. So I do think it's good to get some self data. I would say if you can't do a 360, this Hogan suite is pretty deep and rich to be able to say it's probably pretty likely, if you know this about yourself, that others are probably seeing this other behavior. It's nice to get the 360 data, but we can get to it from a few different angles. So let's talk now about, how do you coach to sort of these fundamental mindset shift areas? Marianne, we just talked a little bit about the arc of the coaching program, but deep within there is about belief or mindset. Kelly just brought up, somebody sees themselves as one way, others see themselves as this. Talk a little bit about how a coaching session goes to change mindset.
To me, that is the ultimate purpose and the reason, and the best experiences in coaching it's when people have their lives transformed, because they really get underneath some of the things that are in their way, challenging beliefs they've had for a really long time that maybe aren't really necessary anymore, or are stopping them from having not only a successful career, which is what the coaching engagement is about, but holistic life. And I also incorporate a lot of reflection between the coaching sessions. I will send, and every meeting the client where they are. Some like it, love it. they would spend, days on it and, emailing back and forth, which is wonderful. But then others are like, yeah, they pull it up when we start the coaching session, and that's okay. But really some deep reflective things to think through to start to challenge how they're thinking about things. Asking them questions like, is that confirmed or assumed in terms of the way they're thinking through things about themselves or others? That's just one example. Or helping them to realize, going back to that data, first and foremost, go to some data, see what's coming out in that exploration that will start to challenge maybe some of the beliefs that they have and the way they're approaching things, and how they could open up to new ways of creating possibilities, understanding how much we do in our head. And that is the core of really what I think is where the magic happens, is getting people. And when the shift always turns in coaching is when you go through a period of time where there's a lot of discussion about what's going on around them and conditions and what's happening and this person. And if they would just do that, things would be different. And how can I make that person act differently? And oh, my boss, and and reminding gently and sometimes forcefully that it has nothing to do with that. It's all inside. It's an inner game. And what's going on in your mind and those mindsets that you have that are there because that's the way, we all are individual. We're born, we have a situation, we grow up with a background. And so it's okay. We are who we are. But stepping back at this point, and that's why coaching is such a gift, to recognize, like, what am I doing that is creating the things that I don't want to be creating, and what can I do to change that, to start creating the things that I can be creating. And a lot of it, I'll just throw out a couple books. These are deeper, a little bit more, I would say, spiritual, psychologically, not as hardcore business, but that I found really helpful with clients. The Courage to be Disliked, which is basically on the works of Adler, who was a peer of Freud and Jung at the time, just not as well known, but about recognizing that we are responsible for our own actions, and not going back and saying, why did this happen? And psychotherapy, but like, I'm doing this, how do I move forward? That's a really good book. And I've had people just like find a new life through that, as well as The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, who also does a series of workshops on how to change mindset and belief and take responsibility. So I could go on for probably 3 days about this work. So I will stop now and let somebody else talk about mind shift changes. But it's not therapy, just to close with that, as Jim brought up before. It's not therapy, but it is getting people to recognize that the noise in their head and a lot of the things they've been saying to themselves, imposter syndrome, is really what's in the way. And when they can start to recognize that, it really gets fun.
So, Steve, I'm just nerding out all these books. The Untethered Soul, grab a Kleenex. That's a deep book. Good. So is Carol Dweck's Mindset, not as deep, but very academic, right? Carol Dweck's Mindset is really about the shifting of to abundance, right? From scarcity. And let's remember what Marianne said is really true, which is we've gotten to where we've gotten because. So lots of these folks have been doing the same thing and been rewarded for this. This behavior is rewarded, and lots of that in corporate America. But now you get the opportunity to sort of clean slate that, take a step towards abundance, take a step towards opening up and learning and doing and being courageous. Scarcity mindset is something that is unfortunately rewarded way too much, I think. And to shift to abundance, I think, Marianne, to your point, that's where you get that real aha and that, this changed my life kind of thing. So big books, little academic on Dr. Dweck's side, but worth it for sure.
Yeah. And I had a client say that the Courage to be Disliked is short if you see it, but it is deep. So it's thick.
Yeah, right.
It's going to take a while to get
and then you have to pause for
right.
Yes.
Right.
Reflect on it. Yeah. Well, I think we've done a good job without asking the question to show the difference between a coaching modality and a training modality. This isn't about here's the 4 steps you take when you give people feedback. That's important for a new leader to know or learn, or even a senior team to refresh themselves. And let's not get ahead of ourselves in the way in which we interact from a nuts and bolts perspective. But leadership coaching is really a business performance tool for somebody who is senior in an organization, maybe not even that senior, but it's so important and impactful that what they do every day ripples to so many people. If you can get that one person to show up different every day, the investment of your labor or your leadership development dollars there may arguably be more valuable than let's train 50 people in a 2-hour program or workshop. You may need a little bit of everything, but it's really important to kind of help think through, I think, using coaching, not for that person that is causing so much noise that you just want them to be barely okay. There is a reason to keep, and we do what we call targeted or talent fit coaching, I mean, but finding that leader who, if they could just open up a couple of other, arteries, how much more valuable they would be, and you see them being there and growing with your organization long term. So hopefully you think through, and my goal of these, every time we do these, is to help organizations think they should use coaching more broadly. Whether using us or somebody else or internal, external, it's not that, it's just use coaching more broadly, because when you can get somebody to engage in this kind of conversation, absolutely, organizational changing and sometimes life changing for that person. We have 4 minutes left. So what I like to close on is talk to us just a little bit about the type of coachee, like when is coaching a valuable resource? I think I just kind of teed this up with this sort of talent fit idea versus, executive coaching, but what type of situation or behaviors do you think you should suggest that an organization say this is the kind of leader that at this stage in their life would benefit from coaching? And if this is a situation, don't put coaching to it. Like, this might be a performance issue. Kelly.
Sure. I would say that coaching, generally speaking, is an investment in the company's future and in the person's future. And I think leadership coaching specifically is an all boats rise scenario. So think of it as your investment to corporate America, to the world at large. It should be those people who you think, man, this guy, this gal, she's got it. She's got it. And she could be even better than. So it's additive in my mind. It's additive. Now, having said that, those are the best opportunities where someone who is sponge-like, embodies that kind of thing, takes things on. That's important. Invest in that person. Don't think that person already has it. Coaching is an additive, wonderful investment. When it doesn't work so well is the last ditch effort of, well, we've tried everything with Kelly and she's really, short of a pip. I don't know. Let's throw coaching at her. That's typically not when coaching is at its best, nor is it at it, does it do most of the time, doesn't do what you want it to do for the coachee. So that would be my yes, do it, and maybe think again about not doing it.
Jim or Marianne, any last comments?
I think she nailed it. I think that really sums it up. It's your top performers, help them be better. Tiger Woods has a coach I always use. It's to get better and better and better and better. I will say that although the helping someone turn around a situation is not ideal, there are situations that those have been the most it's just interesting experiences, and it takes longer to build that trust and that credibility, but it's not that never works. I would say that many times it actually can be very successful, not easy. And it takes a while to get that person because it starts off really rocky. But if they select and work with a coach that can work through some of those real struggles with them and help them to understand how they might be getting in their own way, like I said, going to some of the deeper things, it can be pretty phenomenal to see what happens with people who are about on their way out and actually ended up turning it around. And you know what? Sometimes turning it around means going to another organization. I'll just put that out there.
Or another role within the organization, and everybody can do it with their head held high, and
right.
Yeah.
But it could end up being a win-win for everybody in the end. So it can be used.
I did just put our next webinar again in the chat, and since if you didn't see that from before, I hope you can join us for our next webinar. If you have any questions or comments or want to hear from one of these three folks, let us know. We'll be putting a summary email together, and we can also highlight those books that we each talked about. I know there were some questions about what those books were as well for you to keep up with your own reading. Happy to engage in more conversations if you think coaching's right for your organization. We're at the top of the hour. Thanks, Jim, Marianne, Kelly, for sharing your wisdom, your expertise with us. So grateful to have you on our team, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.